How are you all? It's hot, isn't it? You can take your shoes off if you want. I'm going to take mine off. My father and my wife have come tonight, which makes me especially nervous. Do you know what I mean? Anybody here married? Isn't it the worst thing when your partner comes and sees you give a talk? And then they tell you afterwards what you did wrong, and the fact that you mentioned they were here? Anyway, any of you guys come across this book at all? All right, a few of us. About 3 of us. Great. That's good, I think. Where to begin? So, firstly, I've got this lovely little toy I bought recently, and it's a timer, because I always talk for too long. So I'm going to set it, and it clicks down. You get that. You know how a timer works, I'm sure. And then it will go bing. And I've started to use this, partly because I've been thinking about time, because this book is called Time and How to Spend It, but also because you can get more, work done. Anyway. So I wrote this book, Stuffication, as Mark said, and the big thing about Stuffication was that we're moving from a time of materialism as the dominant value system to something that I call experientialism. So instead of looking for happiness, identity, and meaning in material goods, which is what people generally did and was the dominant value system that underpinned consumerism in the 20th century, we're moving to a time of experientialism. You guys get that? Make sense? Anybody think that is utter nonsense? Feel free to say. Okay. Generally what we'll do is wait till right to the end, but if you hear anything that you think is terrible, please feel free to shout out. Because there's no point in, if we all agree, it's not interesting, is it? Maybe. Okay, and so that book came along, and then what happened was the guys from Penguin would come and talk to me and say, okay, James, this is great. This book, which, it sold some copies and stuff. What's the next big trend? We've done this experiential stuff. Okay, what's the next trend? We want another book from you. And I'd kind of say, well, I don't think this is like spring, summer, autumn, winter. This isn't like color blocking or, microflorals or a certain color pink or whatever. This is, I think, not just a cyclical trend. I think it's a structural trend. I think it's a fundamental change in our existence. So we're moving from material goods to experiences. So, instead of having to own a bike, for example, you can now use a Boris bike. Spotify. We used to have big collections of records and CDs and tapes and stuff, and now we use Spotify. You don't need to own anything. You kind of with me? Basic, as one example, but also, Facebook and social media has changed how we get status. Now, through your experiences, you can get much more status than through material goods comparatively. So in the old days, if you'd been to Chamonix skiing, or you'd been to Paris for the weekend, or been to Cannes, or been to Benicassim, or been to a festival or whatever, nobody would know about that unless you actually went up and told them about it. But nowadays, because you're posting it on Twitter and Facebook and social media, or just digital media and sharing it with friends, everyone knows what we're doing instantly. Aren't those people annoying? We all do it too, though, don't we? Anyway, so they would say to me, okay, James, so what's the next big thing? And eventually, from giving talks in places like Action for Happiness, and people would say to me, okay, great, if I want to move from material things to experiences, what kind of experiences should I spend my money on? Okay, so Stuffication was about consumerism and that shift from spending money on stuff to experiences. Because as I was writing that book, I came across the data that showed that we're happier if you spend on experiences rather than things. Everyone come across that idea? So I'd like to think I helped popularize that, but nobody really knew that certainly 10 years ago. But loads of experiments have been shown that it's better to spend on experiences rather than things. But when you start to spend on experiences rather than things, the thing you're spending, most importantly, isn't just money, it's your time. You see that difference? So then I started thinking, and people would say to me, okay, so what kind of experiences should I spend my money and time on? And I didn't know the answer. I had an opinion, but I didn't know what the answer was. So what I did is I went and talked to people much smarter than me, psychologists, economists, anthropologists, etc., and I stole their ideas and I put it into a checklist. That's kind of the summary of this whole thing. And if you think about Great Dream, checklists are awesome. We'll come to that. Okay, so this is what I did. I went and talked to all those people. I pulled that stuff together. I spent an embarrassingly large amount of time. I'm looking at my wife now. I spent an embarrassingly large amount of time walking around my local park, trying to figure out how I could take all this stuff. And I don't know how many of you read science papers and try and figure out what those statistics mean, etc. But it can be quite numbing. or just hard work, anyway, and trying to take all that stuff and turn that into something that could be actually practical for people to use, and hence I ended up with this 7 rules. Okay, so let's see if this works. All right, that's me. So if you wanted to tweet and say, this guy said something nonsense, that would be funny. Or if you disagree or wanted to contact me, that's my email. Okay, so that's where I say hello. Done that. I'm going to roll back slightly about the idea of how ideas spread. So I came to this originally as an interest point of view, I guess, as a futurist, as a trend forecaster. I became a journalist, and I started doing work in terms of trends and understanding what the future holds. And I think that's interesting, and this is what, Mark and I had this conversation last week, for some of you guys, because you're not just here because you care about your own happiness. You're here because you care about your own happiness, your family's happiness, and actually about the happiness of society. Who just doesn't care about the happiness of society? Who's here for themselves and themselves alone? Come on, put your hands up. There's got to be somebody. Thank you for your honesty, madam. You and I, there's 2 of us. Okay, but everyone else really cares about society, right? You're lovely people. There are some fibbers in the room. Come on. Okay, then we'll look at the problem. That's time, the fact that we only have a certain amount of it. We can look at the list that saves lives. That's my pitch to you about the importance of checklists. And then we'll look at the solution. So briefly, Stuffocation was self-published, then Penguin picked it up and went around the world, had lots of coverage. How ideas spread. So I've been a futurist, like I say, since 2004. And the work I do is inspired by something this guy said. He wrote Neuromancer, and he was on radio in about 1981. The future is already here, it's just not very evenly distributed. Some of you will have heard that already. But the work is informed by something called the diffusion of innovations. Let me just check, is this interesting for you guys? Because some people find this really interesting, and some people are just like, yeah, okay, I've had 3 people nod. You 3, this is for you. This was codified in 1962. This guy, Everett Rogers, was a sociologist, and he noticed he was studying how farming innovations, it was a new type of seed, and he was studying how ideas caught on. And he noticed that it didn't matter if you were looking at the doctors prescribing new drugs or the take-up of firearms by American Indians in what is now like California and the Western United States. All of these things follow the same kind of pattern. When an idea takes off, it follows this pattern. And this line is the take-up of colour TVs, microwave ovens, co-working spaces, interest in well-being. So take-up you've got here could be percentage, it could be numbers, and this is time over here. So what you're effectively looking at is a graphical, it's a graph. I like to think of it as a graphical movie of something happening, right? Does everyone get what's going on here? Yeah? Those same 3 people, this is for you, so I want you to nod or not, yeah? Okay, so what happens is you get a bunch of people here called the innovators. You heard this term? These are the crazies. They're the wild ones. These are the people that have a man bun years ago. Those who don't, that thing, yeah? But this is hip-hop in the early 70s. Okay? Then you have the early adopters, and this is the moment that lots of people say, I've seen this, I know what you're talking about here, okay? This is the people that were getting an iPhone in 2008, say, just after they come out. Obviously, we all have one now, we've moved on to other things, whatever. Okay, then you get the early majority, late majority, and laggards. And what happens here is, so the innovators and the early adopters are the crazies who are kind of, they tend to be at the top of the socioeconomic tree. They tend to be better educated, to travel more, to be well connected, to live in cities rather than in the countryside. There's lots of research that shows all this stuff, okay? The reason I wanted to show you this is it's my belief that this move from materialism to experientialism is going to follow this curve, sure as so many other things have followed this kind of curve. And where we are at the moment is very much in the innovators and the early adopters phase. Okay, there are some people who really get the point. Experience is better than material things. There are some people that are still very materialistic. You kind of with me what I'm saying here? The interesting thing about this is, so my work for the past however many years has been to look at what the innovators and the early adopters are doing and then figure out what the others are going to do next. I'm going back there. Do you see what I mean? And you can figure out what's happening in society. You can look at the innovation to decide what's going to happen in the future. But once you understand this, because you can think about obesity as a really good example here too, we think that way more people are going to be obese in the future because of lifestyles, what we eat, etc. But once you have an idea of what the future is going to look like, you can influence the future, of course. So what you can do is you can make that curve, I should have another picture, shouldn't I? Make the curve go steeper so it happens quicker, or go shallow, or go away. Because, of course, some ideas go, yeah, boom, like man buns. Or just bad ideas. Can I get that idea? So my work is, this is how I see it, is because I believe we're moving from this materialism to experientialism, I want it to happen quicker. Because if you spend your focus on experiences rather than things, you will be happier. So I'm doing some work for the government on this at the moment. And the important thing, I think the reason I wanted to show you this, is if you think about your own happiness and you act in a way and you follow the great dream checklist, or you follow the checklist that I have, which you'll see in a minute, is stories. By acting in that way, moving away from buying way too much stuff that isn't going to make you happy and moving towards stuff that makes you happy, and that's what you do with your time, and you choose to spend more time doing stuff that makes you more happy, you'll be the innovators and early adopters influencing what the others do. That's my take on it. Okay, so the problem. Guess who that is? So he's 5. His name is Woody, named after the Toy Story. It was either that or Buzz Lightyear, and apparently that wasn't a good name for a boy. I mentioned it because we were at breakfast, this is about a month or so back, and my son suddenly, I don't know if how many of you have children, some of you have children, young children, you've had that, gone through that process? You know how they just say random stuff? And you just think, where did that come from? So we were sat having breakfast, trying to get him to, shove cereal in his face so he could get ready and go to school. And he suddenly said, he talked about the movie Bambi. He said, I don't like it when Bambi's mummy dies. It's not nice. Am I doing the voice right? I don't like it when Bambi's mummy, it's not nice. And I kind of was like, well, that's what happens. And if you see those movies, these kids' movies, Frozen as well, the parents die, don't they? Anyway, and my point is, because I had to try and explain to him that what happens is we're all going to die. Bambi's mummy dies, Bambi's going to die, I'm going to die, he's going to die. I didn't really push this on him. I want you to know that. I let him go to school happy. But it's an obvious point. That's mortality, that's being human, is we have this period of time where we can do something, eat, procreate, take the tube, eat kebabs, whatever you do, and that's what's going to happen. So the thing is, time is our problem. You can be bothered about, worry about the planet too. There's all sorts of problems that we have, but for each one of us as an individual, we have this problem that it's going to end pretty soon. So time is what we want most. This is William Penn, the psychologist, but what we use worst. And this guy was talking over 100 years ago. And I think in today's world, it's got so much worse. How many times have you seen people walking on the street checking their telephone? What is that? Anyway, okay, so we've got a whole bunch of reasons. I'm going to try and go through this quickly because, as ever, I kill my time too soon. There are 7 key reasons that sociologists and psychologists have discovered and identified that suggest the reason why we feel so time poor. And yet the weird thing is, we're actually the richest people in terms of time for decades. We have, on average, it's just under 6 hours. I think between 5 and 6 hours we have, on average, a day free time. Now, of course, you're all thinking, I'm not average. Obviously, yeah, I work that bit harder. I live in London, and of course you get longer at the weekends than you do during the week, and nobody's quite average. But if you think about that, between 5 and 6 hours a day is a lot of time. So where's it all going? Why do we all? Who here feels time poor and time pressed for time? And when someone says to you, "How are you?" or "How's your day?" I was cycling along on the South Bank last night, and I sort of fell into cycling alongside this woman. And we briefly had a conversation. I said, "How was your day?" And she went, "Busy." How many of us just say, "Oh, busy," or "crazy busy"? Have you heard that term? Use that term? How weird is that? And yet, actually, we have more time. So what the hell are we doing? So one of the things is we earn more money. I hope that's you. The problem with that is that if you earn £10 an hour and you get a chance to go and see your kid in the end of school term play, and you spend 2 hours of your life fairly bored, for that one moment when your kid does something. No? Who here's been to a school play? Okay, now be honest. Is it boring or is it fun? Who's it? Oh, you're fibbing. Okay. All right, but if you earn £10 an hour, you just lost 20, it's £20, that's not such a big deal. But if you're some kind of hotshot lawyer and you earn, I don't know, £500-600 an hour, that's £1,000. You could have flown to Barcelona and back twice, I don't know, or taken the family. Do you see my point there? Okay, so the problem is that people that are really important and have a lot of status are busy. So therefore, we associate status with being busy, and therefore we all, because status is good for our well-being, you live longer, you're happier if you have lots of status, we all kind of play the game and think, well, busy is good. It's a good thing to be. So when your boss sends you that email, who here actually has stayed at work or worked late and had an email ready to send and saved it until just before they left the office? It's a terrible thing to do, right? You know when you get those emails from your boss at like 7:30 in the morning, but then you send one back? Anyone do that? Yeah. Okay. So many emails, so many incoming. You think about Twitter, you think about Facebook, you think about the 24-hour news cycle, especially with the modern news cycle where it's just moral outrage about nothing generally. So we've got so much more to cope with. If you think about what life was like, and I saw this thing that I think the average office email is read within 6 seconds. Like, what's going on? Just think about email for a moment, and all the messages that we get, and then think about what life was like before the telephone. So you would receive, think about, post was the old way to get messages. You remember the post? And so imagine with post. So post would be, you'd be sitting, let's pretend you work from home. You're sat at the kitchen table, you're doing some work, and you'd hear something come through the door. And you'd go and get the post, wouldn't you? You with me? No one remembers the post. Pretend with me that you remember. You'd take the post, you'd take it back, you'd open it, and you'd read the post. Fantastic. And then you'd carry on with your day. The average person checks their phone 150 times a day. Extreme users are more like sort of 300 times. So just imagine that in the old world of post. You'd sit down to do a bit of work, whatever, with a typewriter. Go and check the door. Get your messages. Come back, do a bit of work. Go and check for the messages again. And then settle down. Maybe you make a cup of tea and then check. You kind of with me? Do you see how ridiculous that thing is? Obviously, I'm going to say turn off your notifications. You know that. Okay. Dirty time. Sociologists call this contaminated time. And this is multitasking. We all know that multitasking is bad for us, but we all still do it at work. But because we do it in work, we now do it in our spare time too. So when you're sat and you're trying to watch, a favorite TV show, or you're, in the park with your kids, you're also checking your email, and you think that's clever. Or you're doing you're surfing the internet for the flights that you might want to book somewhere, or you're doing your shopping, and you're thinking, I'm doing two things at once. That's a really smart thing to do. If you hopefully you'll take a few things out of this tonight. Just don't multitask. It's not smart. And the problem with it is it makes you not feel very good about your time. When you do something, do that thing. And if you want to check email or do it, do the internet, do it. But don't do it while doing something else. Because I think it's one of those really evil things that makes us feel really pressed for time, and we don't need to feel that way. Does that make sense? Okay, so many choices. So one of the challenges is there's always a pop-up restaurant. There's always a new festival. There's been a doubling of festivals in recent years in this country. There's always a new city you could fly to. There's places you can go. So the thing is as well, we live in this incredible experience economy with loads of stuff that you could possibly do tonight. And also, because of Facebook and our phones and the way we're connected to everyone, you're always aware that your friends are doing other stuff. So there's this kind of plethora of things that we could do, and we know about so many of them, and therefore there's that term FOMO, FOMO, fear of missing out. So we have that sensation because, of course, we're all connected with at least the Dunbar number of 150 people, but way more than that. And your ex is always on Facebook doing something interesting. And it's wrong to stalk them, but they do seem to have a nice life. Okay, also, we lack the education, because you think about our education system, people want to get an MBA. People do marketing degrees. Sorry, let's not just stay on that. But you know, people do degrees nowadays that are about getting a job. What job are we going to get at the end of this? They're not there just to kind of learn of how to be. So no one pulls you to one side at school and says, you know what you should really do is think about how you spend your time. What they do is you teach you stuff so you will be an effective worker and you will earn lots of money and be successful in that way. But we don't have the same education around how we spend our time. I think one of the challenges, if you think about food, can you tell which one of these is the healthy choice? What do you think? The one that side or this side? That one lady saying that side. Thank you. Everyone else thinks that side? Okay, we're mostly saying this. Okay, I agree. I think when it comes, someone has challenged me and told me that looks more healthy, but that is strange. I think when it comes to food, we know what's healthy and what isn't. But when it comes to how we spend our time, I don't think we do because, and this is kind of a pitch for why I wrote the book and why I think it's relevant, I don't think anyone's really spent a lot of time figuring that out. And that's one of the interesting things in the literature as well, in the work that psychologists have been doing, is until recently, no one was really focusing so much on some of that stuff. And I think the problem with this is if we get, I don't know, however long you live, wasting your time is like winning the lottery and burning money. It's like winning 10 million pounds or euros. Obviously, this is nothing about Brexit. Whatever your take is on that. But you know, imagine you had £300 to spend at the weekend and you spent £200 of it and you just burnt the rest. You wouldn't do it, would you? So if you've got a certain amount of time to spend, you want to get the most out of that time, no? Okay, so therefore we need a list. I love lists. Great Dream is a really good example of a list. I wanted to take all the work that I've done and put it into a list because it's practical. There is a 19-point checklist that the NHS uses. It looks a bit like this. And the questions, I don't know if you can see them, are, has the patient confirmed his/her identity? Is the surgical site marked? Left leg, not right leg. And apparently in the US, they also write, not this leg, as well as this leg. I'm serious. Somebody told me this the other day. And another one here is, have all team members introduce themselves by name and role? Hello, I'm Dave, I'm the surgeon. Hello, I'm, George, I'm the anaesthetist. Isn't that weird that something so simple? The interesting thing about this 19-point checklist is nobody has to do any more training. It doesn't cost a penny. It costs a few minutes of time. And it improves outcomes, or it reduces deaths and surgical complications from surgery by 33%. It makes people who are bloody brilliant and clever and highly trained a lot less likely to kill people. Checklists are awesome. If you don't use them, use them. And the reason for that is when something goes from being simple to being complicated, brilliant people like surgeons, airline pilots of all stripes, know that when something goes from simple to complicated, if you've got a checklist, you make sure you do the basic stuff so you don't mess up. Okay, so there's a checklist. It's in this book, Time and How to Spend It. So it's a 7-rule checklist to choose better experiences. They're all based on evidence. I'm working with the Behavioural Insights team, the Nudge Unit at the moment, to design some experiences based on basically really clever people, much cleverer than me. I stole their ideas, made it into a checklist. People at Harvard and Stanford and Oxford, etc. Became a bestseller. So the 7 rules, that's the interesting bit, isn't it? I figure. His stories, S-T-O-R-I-E-S. I know that you can spell stories, by the way. I just can't help myself but say that bit. So what I figure we'll do is we'll go through some of these, because otherwise I will go on forever. I ran some workshop with a company about designing experiences, and this took 14 hours. But I won't keep you here. It'll be about 12. What time have we got this place till, Mark? Till midnight's good. Okay, so can you lock the doors? Okay, let's take this stuff seriously. This is about time. How am I doing for time? Okay, yeah. Okay, so I figure we'll do story, and story's ish complicated, or one of the more complicated ones. Shall I talk them through as a basic idea, first of all? Yeah. Why don't we do that? Thank you. I've not done this before, but I think that's a better way to do it, isn't it? Okay. Story's about story. Stories are awesome because when you tell somebody a story, it fires something called mirror neurons. That leads to empathy. Empathy is connection. Connection is relationships. Relationships is happiness. Why don't we stop there? Actually, let's take a pause. It's a game I like to play. So, possibly with the person, not the person you spoke with earlier, but maybe we could all stand up and play an annoying game. Thank you in advance. So we're all going to stand in a minute, and you're going to talk to someone, not the person that you came with, not the person you spoke to before, and I want you to tell them a story. And I want to tell you about a story about yourself, about when something went wrong. I want the story to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Who doesn't want to do that? Yeah, okay. And that's exactly why you need to, and you'll understand a bit more. Because you know when somebody says to you, how's work? What do you say? Oh, it's great. Oh, it's all really good, you know. And actually, it's really good to sort of let your guard down a little bit. So can everyone stand? And then what I will do in about, let's try and do this quickly. So you've got a bit of maybe 30 seconds or so to have a think, and then I'll call time. And then with that person, one of you tells a story. You'll have 2 minutes, and then we'll swap over. And then when you're finished, the second person telling the story, if you can sit down again. Is everybody clear on what we're doing? Has anyone got any questions? Come on. Everybody knows what we're doing? Okay, great. So find somebody, tell them a story of when something went wrong. Go. If anybody here wants to share their story or the story they were told, put your hand up. Who wants to share their story? Somebody. Madam. Oh, this lady does. Fantastic. Could somebody bring their microphone to this lady? Oh, brave of you. Thank you. I hope it's a good one.
Hi.
Hello. What's your
Anna.
name? Hello, Anna.
It's a really long story, so I think I'm going to do like a small version of it.
Okay.
So this is a story about sending emails that didn't get sent. I had the responsibility to send a group of employees of our client a whole load of emails, like a newsletter that's meant to go out every 2 weeks, and it was my responsibility, and I completely forgot. I was reminded that I was meant to send it when I had an evening conversation with my boss talking about the day. Halfway through a sentence, he asked me, did you send it? And I've kind of just stuck like a deer in headlights. So he obviously knew I hadn't sent it. So I go to work the next day, and halfway through the day, my colleague in front of me is like, oh, so what's the response? How many people have opened the email? Again, I'm like a deer stuck in headlights. I haven't sent the email. 2 days late, and this email's meant to go out to an entire company, and I haven't done it. At this point, my guilt is so obvious and vast that I realize I need like an intervention, that just sending the email is not good enough. So I decided that I was going to stop everything I was doing and create a process and a checklist of sorts so that this wouldn't happen again, because it wasn't just enough to send the email out now. I needed an explanation and I needed a strategy. So I developed that, and I finally sent the email out after the entire team knew that one of the senior leaders had royally failed at a very simple task. But we now have a nice, flashy new process. So that's the happy ending. But I was very stuck throughout the middle of the story.
Thank you very much for sharing. Anyone else want to share a story? Sir. And well done for the process, and for making yourself look smart, even when you'd messed up. That was the good thing.
It's not a work one. Does it have to be a work one?
Not work is...
It's a water-related, running a bath type story. I don't know whether any of the rest of you have had this type of issue. I've had it 3 times, but I was only showing with Rita here the last time, which wasn't too long ago. I've got a very small studio
you do this
flat.
regularly?
Sorry?
You do this regularly?
Well, it was not intended, but it sounds like a little bit. There's been a big gap since the previous time, about 10 years.
Okay.
So I left the bath running, basically, and went back to my computer, and then there was a knock on the door, and I could see the water on the floor, and good reason why there was going to be somebody knocking on the door. It doesn't get any better, the story. I just was sort of like, obviously put the hand up, what can you do? And helped her out and bought her a bottle of wine, and that seemed to placate her. That is the story, that's it.
And now you live with her.
I don't know how to
you live with her. Just say that, yeah? And now you're together.
Anymore.
That's how you met your wife?
No.
Okay, fine. Okay, thank you very much. All right. We're going to come back to that stuff in a minute about why that kind of works, but you might actually probably already have a bit of an idea of how this works and how telling that story in that way ticks quite a few of these different boxes. Okay, so story is the importance of story because it connects you with somebody. Did you feel as you listened to that person's story, you could understand what they were going through? As you were telling that story there, I was certainly picturing, we've been in that situation, the bath and water coming over. Okay, transformation is about, it's about change, it's about development. It's also about being true to who you are. Janis Joplin nailed it when she said, don't compromise yourself, you're all you've got. But this is about being your true self, but also becoming who you've got the potential to be. And importantly, it's not just about seeing that as a sort of wishy-washy kind of idea, because when I say it like that, I think it sounds a bit kind of like, okay, great. What do you do with that, right? Because this is about how you spend your time. This is something you can do in your weekend. It's something you can do on your holiday. So as opposed to, go somewhere on holiday and think, I'm just going to lay on a sun lounger, you can think about the importance of transformation because that will change your holiday from just a holiday that's kind of relaxing and calming or whatever, and something that really takes you to another place and helps you grow and develop. With me? I like that point of view. Outside and offline, I'm sure you can get that. There's so much coming out about the importance of nature, of being out in nature. You've seen that stuff, that 2 hours a week seems to be the kind of minimum that every person should have. Those are data that shows that, yes, we spend way too much time in buildings and indoors, and offline as well. And Vanessa, you've written about this, haven't you? And you've researched this stuff. And I was with the Behavioral Insights team the other day, and they were talking about there's a new study that shows that some people were paid to go off Facebook for a month, and some other people stayed on Facebook as normal, and the people that came off Facebook were happier. How many of you charge your phones in the bedroom? Who does? Wow. Okay. So if you don't charge your phone in your bedroom, you'll sleep better. And you'll have more sex. You're welcome. So it depends. If you like sleeping and you like sex, charge your phone somewhere other than your bedroom. Relationships. Yes, hello. Oh, you disagree with that? Okay, great.
So if you put your phone on airplane mode, but you still charge it, is that okay?
It's okay, but the data suggests that because you've got that device with you, that device is the thing that you speak to your boss or speak to your family and your mum and all those people you're connected with, and you probably check your email, your work email and stuff on there. So just by having, I think there's something about people having their phones out at dinner. It makes you think of those kind of things because that's how our brains work in an associative way. So yes, airplane mode is better than, certainly don't have it on so you can get calls during the night. Unless you've got teenage children. I've had people that have come to me and said, look, I've got teenage kids, I need my phone there. And I understand that, okay? But yeah, that phone in your mind has all those things that happen with it. And if you want to calm down and have a restorative, relaxing night's sleep and more sex, did I mention that? Don't have your phone in bedroom, because especially you and your partner will be bringing in all those associations, your in-laws, his in-laws, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? You're bringing all that stuff in, and it's just you in the room. There is statistics that suggest that 10% of people check their phones during sex. Now, that's in The Economist, and I don't know about you, but when it's in The Economist, I consider it a fact. And that is research conducted at a very reputable university in the US. So there's, I don't know how many people there are here, what, 100, 150 or so? So that means there's about 10, 15 people here who check their phones during sex. So could those people just stand up and share with us how you do it? I mean, and what's so important? I mean, the football's important, I get that. But, surely you can leave that for a few minutes. Anyway, okay. So don't charge your phones. Actually, I was thinking that earlier. If you take one thing away from this, don't charge your phone in the bedroom. And if the reason that you charge your phone in the bedroom is because it's an alarm clock, go crazy. Buy yourself one. Intensity. Intensity is about flow. Flow is this idea from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi from the 80s and the early 90s in particular, that found that what we think we're going to be really happy when we're sat doing very little with our feet up, sitting, laying on a sun lounger, watching TV at the end of the day when the work is done. But it turns out that we're much more likely to be happy when we're doing something that's really intense and challenging. Extraordinary. I'm trying to think of the best way to put this in a really kind of simple term. So when we remember stuff that really kind of sticks out, that's kind of really interesting. Have you heard of the peak-end rules? There's this idea discovered by psychologists like Barbara Fredrickson and Daniel Kahneman and Donald Redelmeyer that we remember what happens at the peak of an experience and what happens at the end. Turns out there's some new data that suggests that what happens at the beginning is really important too. And if you think about, let's take your weekend as an example, okay? Your weekend lasts for 48 hours or so, and then it's gone. The present moment is a really short time, of course, but we have way longer to look back and remember that time. So what you do with that weekend is really important, because if you just have a normal everyday time, actually you won't remember anything from it. You kind of with me? So most of life is that kind of flat grey line of existence, isn't it, yeah? Cleaning your teeth, I hope. Being on the tube, coming here tonight, going on a Boris bike, which is, actually that can be fun. But the stuff we remember is those kind of high moments, actually the low moments. The time that you got into university or didn't get into the university you wanted to get into. Or, she said yes or he said no, or you got the job, or you got sacked, or, do you see what I mean? So those extraordinary things are really important in terms of creating a story for who we are. Think again about that idea of story and the importance of something happening. And that gives us, and those extraordinary moments are very indicative of how we remember something. Make sense? Ish. We've got more on that in a bit. Status and significance is amazing. Yes, hello. That's a very good point. One of the interesting things about extraordinary is also that ordinary stuff is really important for happiness too. And actually treating ordinary things with as much, as special in some way. There's this lovely research by Cassie McGillner at UCLA that shows if you have a perfectly ordinary weekend, but in some way you decide it's special, it becomes really amazing. Are you with me? And yes, this is not, look, intensity is all about this. I mean, what's interesting about this, I think, is that you don't need to tick every box every single time. This is really, so you wake up, and I've got some stickers, because I was inspired by the Great Dream cards and stuff, which I have on the wall in our kitchen. I made some stickers, so I've got one on my telephone that has this stories thing. So you might wake up on a Saturday morning and think, I kind of want to stay in. I actually just want to watch Netflix or whatever, I don't know. So actually, you're not getting outside and offline, but maybe that's great because you're going to hang out with your best friend or your partner or something, and actually that's great for that relationship. So I remember a conversation I had with a guy called Tom Gilovich at Cornell, who's kind of very much involved in this area, and we were talking about gratitude, and I was trying to play with this, he was saying that sometimes you just don't feel very grateful. Sometimes you can do it, and, Mark got everyone here to do that. It's a really nice thing to feel, but sometimes you're just not in that mood. So what do you do at that time if you want to also have a really kind of pleasant, ongoing existence? Maybe there's something else you can play with. Do you see what I mean? So the extraordinary stuff, because I've kind of done that in a very short kind of way, it's not about building up, there's nothing wrong with building up memories for the future. And actually, if you design your weekend or your holiday, or think in terms of, I want to have something that's going to give my, what's called the remembering self, something really exciting to look back on, your experiencing self, the person that lives through that process, is going to have a bloody good time as well. Do you see what I mean? Also, if we're going to get into this, then the anticipating self is really important to think about. And one of the magical things that you should, another thing, if you do take away just a few things, is book stuff far further into the future than you do now. This is not anti-spontaneity. This is, serendipity is wonderful, just stuff that just happens. This is why being in flow, the idea of intensity, is so important. But if you book dinner with, let's say, your best friend, or a Sunday lunch with your folks or something, in like mid-November or late November, now, you're going to look forward to it. Or you book your holiday. Oh, you don't like your folks, no? Fair enough. Okay. If you don't like these people, don't book lunch with them. In fact, it'll have the opposite effect. Don't book lunch with someone that you don't want to see 6 months into the future, because that will be awful. But book something else. Think about wedding days. They're kind of very short and not much happens. And often it's kind of a bit boring, aren't they, I think. But, there's that build-up to it, and you remember anyway. So does that make sense? It's not about not living for the present, but you can design stuff in a really smart way to get more from, the short time that we have. Okay, status and significance. Who here knows somebody who likes to keep up with the Joneses? Let me check. Do you all know that phrase, keeping up with the Joneses? Yeah? So who here knows somebody? A few of you put your hands up. Neighbours, people you work with, those annoying people. Who here keeps up with the Joneses? 1 man, 2 men, 3. Isn't that interesting? Lots of us know people that keep up with the Joneses, but none of us do it. Everybody know what this phrase means? Okay, because the thing is, we all do. Status is incredibly important for us. There's a longitudinal piece of research I think went on for decades called the Whitehall Study by a guy called Michael Marmot that shows very, very clearly that status matters. If you have more status, you live longer, you're healthier, and you're happier. So now we all want more status, don't we? I love that look on it. It's people going, ugh, it's horrible. So we all know that vegetables, eating more vegetables, doing more exercise, makes us live longer. And we're healthier, right? So we encourage people we know, our children, to eat more vegetables. We all make a point of eating broccoli and kale, even though it's not that nice, really, is it, compared to ice cream? People wear, horrific bright clothes and, leggings and stuff to show that they go to the gym. Because that makes you healthier and happier and you live a longer, better life. But nobody wants to admit they want more status, even though there is incredibly robust data that shows that if you want to be happier, healthier, live a longer life, status is incredibly important. And I've done workshops with people, and everyone bristles at status. And so therefore, I think we need to think about significance. Maybe I should have just skipped the whole status, called it significance. But anyway, significance is really about status. It's not just about you, it's about other people as well. Oprah Winfrey is the wonderful example about this, because she is a billionaire, and she's given away more than $400 million to other people, to causes, to help other people get on in life. So her status that she has is about significance as well. It's about giving. There's a lovely book called Happy Money in 2011 from Liz Dunn and a guy called Mike Norton at Harvard. And they said there's 2 places you spend money. One was experiences, agreeing with my point of stuffication, thank you. And the other one was on other people. You seen that research? If you've got £100 to spend, if you want to be happier, don't spend it on yourself, spend it on other people. There's more research coming out now that shows you should do the same with time. It's again, Cassie McGillner at UCLA. What's really interesting, I think, here is that you can always get more money. So if you can spend it on someone else, you can always get more money. But you can't do that with time. Once you've spent time, it's gone. But it turns out that if you have a spare hour or a couple of hours or whatever, if you spend that helping somebody else or doing something for somebody else, you'll get more happiness than if you do something for yourself. It's kind of weird, no? Because you can't get the time back. There's a bunch of reasons they think why that may be the case. We feel like we have more time, we're better with it, we connect with other people. Okay, so that's my kind of whip through, but I want to go through story. How am I doing for time? Okay. So I talked about this. This is the domino line to happiness. And the reason, the way this works, so when you have a story, this mirror neurons fire. So if I tell you about the time that I I was skiing and I did a big jump and I landed on some French children. And I really did, and the dad was not happy. And I apologized. I want to make it clear. And he was still not happy. Anyway, the thing is, as I tell that story, actually, I've told that story in a lot more detail sometimes. If somebody tells you a story about a time they were, on a horse and fell off, you can picture the horse, and that's mirror neurons. You'll get that kind of idea. That's a physical manifestation of empathy. That's connection. That's relationships. That's happiness. Turns out as well, if you want to be successful, you should aim for happiness too. A bunch of research coming out proving that point too. And so what's kind of interesting here, I think, is the kind of story you should tell, because that will come from experience, should be the kind of story that's most likely to connect with somebody. And it turns out there's a particular kind of story, and it's called the hero's journey. The hero's journey is the archetypal story that every human culture tells, from the Eskimos in the north to the Yoruba of West Africa to the Americans and us. Anybody here been on a date with somebody else, and as they're telling you a story or talking about something they're really passionate about, you're just really bored? So the problem is, for lots of stories, there are things that separate us as well as connect us. And the magic of telling a story and the shape of this archetypal story is the reason this story has lasted the test of time, this hero's journey, and we'll see as here it's also called the Man in Whole story from a guy called Kurt Vonnegut, the writer, is while the person may not recognize the exact context and the content, so you may not go horse riding, for example, or you may not have a bath, you may never have overrun your bath, you can still picture somebody doing something wrong and embarrassing themselves. Sorry to use that example. So it turns out that stories have a particular shape, and the shape is this. You start off with somebody in an okay situation, things go wrong, they fall into a hole, and they come out the other end. This is the story of Jesus, it's the story of Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, it's the story of Cinderella. Do you want me to run through how that works? Cinderella, she has a mum dies. And then her dad marries that woman, then those horrible sisters, everything's bad at the bottom, goes up a bit because she meets the fairy godmother. Fairy godmother sends her to the ball. She meets that guy. Actually, this was slightly complex. It drops down again because then she goes home and doesn't see him. But then he has the golden slipper. He gets her, and happily ever after. Was that? You're keeping up with the story, right? The thing about this story is that's the story that everybody tells, and the reason is I think it's it's an evolution of story. This is the one that works. When you tell this story, somebody else listens, because they recognize the story. Because we've all left the tap running too long. We've all messed up at work. We've all done something wrong. We've all failed at some point in our lives. Somebody has said no to us. We failed to get into the school or university or something. Our team lost. You with me? Or has anybody here never failed? I must do this talk in the States and see what happens there. Okay, can we edit that out if we're going to do this as a video thing, yeah? Okay. So I think this is the human experience. If you think about our ancestors, they would have come to big mountain passes and gone past them. They would have come to, huge rivers or lakes or oceans and crossed them. They would have come to the Ice Age and survived it. They had to deal with cave hyenas in Europe and Neanderthals, etc. And they came out the other side. So when you tell a story in this shape, you are telling the story to somebody of a shape that they inherently recognize. With me? So therefore, when you think about the kind of experience you should have, this comes to your point about should you kind of plan for the future, you should think about the story that's going to come out the other side. And when stuff goes wrong, instead of being upset that it's going wrong, revel in it. Because that's why people love their friends who are dating. Because they've got so many stories of when it goes wrong. But you think about those friends you have who go and stay in a villa or something or some place in the summer. You say, how was your holiday? And they're really, they're smug people. Come on, we've all got a smug friend, haven't we? Or maybe you are that smug person, okay. But you know, those people that you say, how was your holiday? Oh, it was amazing. Or you say, it's lovely food, wonderful. That's a crap story. What about your friend who goes camping and the tent blows down, or the kid was sick in the car, or that bus trip across, I don't know, Ecuador or India or something, and something went wrong? I don't know about you, but they're better stories, aren't they? And just think about that importance of when you tell a story, you fire the mirror neurons the person wants to listen to. That's empathy, that's relationship, that's connection, that's happiness. So if you want to set off the domino line to happiness through your experiences and how you spend your time, a story is awesome. And the thing is that's really important here, there's a more drawn out version with the hero's journey. You can see the different parts of it. It's quite detailed. Most of us, when it comes to the weekend or a holiday or how we want to spend our time, what we look for is the happy ending, don't we? That's what we want. I want to really have a nice weekend. I know you're going to think, of course, that's what you want. But a nice weekend is a meaningful weekend. A nice weekend and a meaningful weekend involves the bit where everything goes wrong. Or at least it's called the road of trials in the hero's journey. And for that, you need tests, allies, and enemies. You need people in your way, because then you can discover who you are. And you can earn that happy ending. A happy ending without the struggle is nothing. Okay, offline. We talked about this. Jeremy Corbyn, look. The important thing is to work out, to notice that this woman was at MIT, she's now at NYU, Natasha Dow-Schull, is that the way that our phones are designed, more people are finding out about this now, is exactly the same way that the most addictive machines on this planet are designed, these things. So just bear in mind, you are part of an experiment, and the reason that we all check them incessantly, in the first thing in the morning, etc., is because they're designed to basically hook us. We're all addicted. And the data's very clear. Less screen time, more happiness. Steve Jobs was wonderful about this. He was asked just after the iPad came out, I bet your kids love it. And he said, no, they haven't played with it yet. We limit how much technology our kids use at home. If that's coming from Steve Jobs, I don't know about you, but I think we can all learn something there. Anyway, okay, so extraordinary. Okay, so this is a bit about the peak end rule. It was discovered through a number of experiments, and one of them was proctology. Anyone know what proctology is? Gosh, no, I don't know. It's basically, they put a podder up your bum. Okay. And apparently it's pretty uncomfortable. Who here has... No, don't worry about that. But it's pretty uncomfortable procedure. And what they discovered was when they asked people afterwards, this is the stuff about the peak end rule that I was talking about. If they left the prodder in for a bit longer, and these things must be quite of a size, but if they leave, I don't know how big they are, if they leave them in for a period at the end, but without moving them around a bit, okay, the person would remember the overall experience in a more pleasant way. So even though the experiencing self, coming about that person who's in the present moment, had more pain, if you think about it, annoyance. Let's say it's a 10-minute thing, and you've got 10 minutes of this annoying thing, and at times it's really annoying. But if the last bit was kind of okay-ish, less uncomfortable, they remembered it as more pleasant. You kind of with me? And some other things have been looked at in terms of queuing and stuff. And what happens at the peak, those particular bits in the end, is really important. And if you think about, time, it's flowing through here. The present moment is just here and gone, here and gone, here and gone. And designing stuff, I don't know if I'm going through this too quickly now. This is what happened. This is the future, the top bit. This is the anticipating self. The experiencing self is the bit in the middle. And the bit at the end is, stuff that's happened and gone, is where the remembering self exists. You kind of with me? So therefore, designing and thinking about your experiences, you should think about your anticipating self. That's the free happiness bit. You should think about your experiencing self, the person who's actually living through it, and then also about your remembering self as well. Because if you do that, you'll create a richer, kind of happier existence. And you can do this using, this is the new peak end rules. So I've taken some more modern science around this. And there is, as you can see, there are 4 ways that you can design peak experiences: NAFU, new, awe, flow, and unusual. We'll talk about flow in a minute. Unusual, you get that idea. It's unusual stuff, right? This is why holidays are so much fun. Awe is super important for happiness and well-being, and that's standing at the top of a mountain. It's looking at the stars. So if you stay up late on holiday and you stay up and you look at the stars, you remember that, and you get a sense that there's something bigger out there than just us, and new things too. But what's really interesting here is, I think, the importance. That's my thing. It works, huh? All right. I think we'll do about 5-10 more minutes, then we'll do questions. In case you guys got some questions, maybe.
Yeah.
All right, one person. Thanks very much. You and I, we'll stay and talk. Okay, so interesting, there's research looking at holidays by a guy called Simon Kemp in New Zealand, a psychologist down there, that found that it wasn't just the end, it's also what happens at the beginning that is really important. So therefore, my take on this is you can think about how you spend your time, a chunk of time, in terms of the importance of the end and of the beginning in particular. And you think about how you design that, your first day of your holiday and the last day, the first few hours of your week and the last few hours. And there's some lovely research in sort of anthropological world of looking at the idea of exploring and exploiting. So at the beginning, if you go back some years to our ancestors, when they came across a new valley, they would kind of look for where the berries were and where the animals were to kill. They would explore. And then once you know where those are, you can exploit that. You kind of with me? And you can also think of this in terms of searching and savoring. So at the beginning of a holiday, you'll go, here, there, and everywhere, try and figure out where the nice places to eat are. But if you design your time really well, at the end, instead of kind of like going for more new, crazy stuff, you might savor and go to one of the places you've already found. And if you do that, you can... I haven't got the hero's journey brings this together really well. This is why these all connect. The beginning of the hero's journey, that kind of man in whole structure that you saw, there's a time there of kind of accepting a role and accepting an adventure and saying, I'm going to go and take this adventure on. And at the end, the hero comes back to kind of settle. Everything's changed. We're into a new world kind of thing. And if you do that really well, if you think about those weekends that you've been on, where you've stayed right to the last bit and you've got the last flight home on the Sunday night. Ever done that? And you rush into work the next morning and it's all kind of stretched. Actually, if you take the earlier flight home and you go for like a nice lunch and you arrive properly back, everything will work better. Don't know if I've explained that well. Anyway, intensity. Okay. I really like this. So this is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and the important thing here is that the popular assumption is that no skills are involved in enjoying free time and that anybody can do it. That was one of the lines that made me want to write this book. Yet the evidence suggests the opposite. Free time is more difficult to enjoy than work. Leisure does not improve the quality of life unless one knows how to use it effectively, and it is by no means something one learns automatically, which is kind of scary, no? Mark, you did that work on autopilot, didn't you? About how something like 90-odd% of people live their lives on autopilot. We don't think about what we're going to do, just we carry on doing what we did. And if we're going to do that, and yet we know that free time is more difficult to enjoy than work, unless you actually know how to use your time effectively, I don't know about you, I want to learn how to do it effectively. So, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's big idea was flow, and that's what he discovered. Things like surfing, things like playing music in a band. In particular, there's 3 different types of flow. There's you can get into flow on your own when you're meditating or something. There's coactive flow, which you would get on a park run when you're doing something with somebody else. And there's interactive flow, which is when you're doing something, directly with somebody. So jazz is amazing, because as you're playing, someone starts playing something else and you kind of riff off each other. Or if you're playing tennis, because you've got to deal with the ball coming back at you because someone's hitting it. And you can design an intense flow experience. Because, of course, sometimes these things can just happen. But if you want to and you care about, getting the most out of your time for happiness and success, etc., you can follow this. And this is, I've obviously read a fair bit around this stuff. So I've brought it into this DAFT PUNK checklist. You can tell I like checklists, right? So DAFT PUNK is all about being in the moment. Delete distractions, put your phone down. Being active, when you're physically active and mentally active, that's really important. Risk is incredibly useful. If things might go wrong, you are so much more in the moment. Like when you give a talk and you're really in the moment, or you're dancing, particularly if you're dancing, with your kids or with someone you really like. or dancing at home so nobody's watching, or singing in the shower. Goals and feedback, so you need to know where you're heading to if you're doing a good job or not. And then unpredictable, new, and complex. And I really like people to remember this DAFT PUNK checklist. Does it make you think of anything? Well, thank you very much. That wasn't planted. Were you going to say DAFT PUNK too? That's what it makes me think of too. Now, what's another way to get people to remember it, do you think, with DAFT PUNK? It's late, isn't it? Do you fancy a dance? Come on. Okay, so we are going to dance to DAFT PUNK. We are. And the magic of that is you're going to be in the moment. We're all embarrassed together. I am English. I am a terrible dancer. So what we'll do to make it more fun, Mark, you in the mood for a dance? Come on. Is we're going to do silly dancing. And what we'll do, come on, on your feet, please, come on. I know you're tired, come on. Unless you've got a physical reason why you can't get on your feet, we're all going to dance now. My dad's going to dance, and, it's a long day, haven't you? All right, and what we're going to do is we're all going to copy the same person. So we're going to have one person, and what will happen? No, you come up, Mark, you come up. So Mark and I are going to kick this off. And then what I'll do is I will pick people who are doing, and they will obviously want to play along, and they will do the ridiculous dancing as well. And the key is that we will do silly dancing, we'll do the same one together. Now, I don't want to lay this down as too much of a challenge for you, but I've done this in the Netherlands, and those people are good. And they were not stones, they were normal people. So I will start to embarrass myself to show you what I mean. Is everybody up for this? Who doesn't want to do it? Go on, be honest. Well, thank you, because this is what risk is all about. If you all put exactly, you can't take your phone and think about it, okay, we're going to go.
Apparently I broke the microphone, apologies about that. And thank you all for playing along, because that was better than the Dutch. So you should be very proud of yourselves. Okay, so very quick summary. My beautiful son, Woody, and we're all going to die. It's sad, but true. He's going to die too, hopefully after me. We don't know what good experiences are because we didn't learn how to make that distinction. Not knowing how to spend our time is like having free money and burning it. Because that's what life is, no? Being alive is amazing, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's an incredible opportunity to go and have some fun. And it's a bit like food. You can go and eat really bad food if you don't care. Or if you find out what good food is, you eat more good food. And so if you find out better ways of spending your time, the non-McDonald's, the empty calories, the non-sugar version of how to spend your time, that's how you should spend your time, I think. And therefore we need a checklist. And the checklist is this stories idea. It's in my book. I think that's me. Yeah, that's me. Thanks very much, guys.
You're going to do questions then?
And do you guys have any questions? Anyway, there was one lady. You and I are going to have some questions. If you guys got any questions, practical ones, James, this is rubbish, type ones, I don't mind. Shall we? Sir?
When you talked about status,
yes.
Did you mean work, including in life outside of work?
All of it.
All of it, okay.
Yeah.
So seek status at work?
Seek status generally.
Just generally, okay.
Yeah, it does sound so awkward to say it, doesn't it, right?
Yeah, it does.
It's really awkward. But the truth is you will live, if you want to live a longer, happier, healthier life, status is handy. It's not me saying that, it's the research that says that. Now, why that is the case is a really interesting question. And this is what, The Spirit Level, that great book by Kate Wilkinson and Richard Pickett, is it?
Yes.
If you look at that book and you read it, you don't need to look too much into that. The inequality issue is not so much about differences in money, it's differences in status that has that impact on people. This is one of the reasons why if we move from a materialistic to an experiential world, that would be really good. It's one of the things I'm really excited about this whole experience, economy experientialism, is in a materialistic world, if you've got a banker who earns, say, £1 million a year, and you've got someone else who earns £30,000 a year, it's very clear who's winning. It's very clear who's got the status. But then, what about that if that girl who earns £1 million a year works at the weekend, doesn't get to enjoy their holidays because they've always got to go back to the office or deal with calls or something, and that person who earns £30,000 a year finishes work at 5:30, goes plays tennis with friends, comes to Action for Happiness events, or whatever they want to do. If you shift your lens from being materialistic to being experiential, it's a much more level playing field, a much more interesting playing field as well.
Great.
Does that make some sense, I think? Hello.
Because people who earn £1 million are able to afford amazing experiences, and we are saying that people without status can't, although they can imagine kind of have amazing experience with not spending a penny. So I'm a bit like, why do you need to have status to have amazing experiences?
Thank you very much for that question. I'm not saying that you need to have status to have an amazing experiences at all. All I'm doing in this book and in my work is reporting what scientists have discovered. So although I'm standing here and I'm saying stories, that is a proxy, that's a very brief version of saying, if you go and read the science papers, more status will help you live longer. I am saying that, as you'll know, you can spend £400,000 on a vacation and go around the world in 3 weeks, or you could go camping on the south coast of England with your family and have an amazing time. And actually, warm beer with a few meaningful friends in Wales or something tastes much better than chilled champagne on a beach in the Maldives or something, if that's what makes you happy. But those experiences, one is definitely fancier than the other and has more status. But choosing how to spend your time and knowing how to spend your time, I think our status is changing too. So,
because also I believe a lot of well-off people actually never have the time to spend with family and friends. So
one of the interesting things here is that if you move from materialism to experientialism, the key currency for material success was money. But the key currency for experiential success is time. Because you can't have the experience without spending time doing it. Do you see what I mean? So the mark of sophistication in the materialistic world, if you think about the FT's how to spend it, was knowing how to spend your money. The mark of sophistication, the sign that you know what you're doing in a world of experientialism, is knowing how to spend your time. And if you think about it, we could all go get more money. It's not that complicated. You can either work longer hours or you can earn more money. You can't get more time. I mean, sure, you can eat better food, you can go running more often, and you can stretch it out a little bit, sure. But you come across the concept of the time bank, how we have 24 hours, I think it's something like 86,000 seconds or something a day. But the thing about the time bank is each day, that time's gone. You can't get an overdraft. You can't get more. You can't put more in. It doesn't work that way. It will stop, because one day you'll go to the time bank and there'll be no time there, and that will be your time gone. So knowing how to spend your time versus knowing how to spend your money, don't worry about the money. Money is one indicator of status, but so is education level, so is, all sorts of different things.
But that all involves money. Education level involves money. So a lot of your state is born from money.
Money helps.
I might be able to
Education,
retire earlier, and that gives me all the time then.
Yeah. So look, I'm not anti-money.
Yeah.
Money's great. Money means you can go on certain kind of holidays, etc., and that's fun. If you want to go skiing, if you want to do all sorts of things. Let's not get too focused on the status thing, because again, it's coming back to the stories thing. Each one of those STORIESs is really helpful for how you should spend your time. But you don't need to tick every box every time. And if you are really uncomfortable with that idea of status, ignore it. But also, you'll notice that I didn't call it status, I called it status and significance. And actually, do you know, I'm going to stick with status, because although everybody finds it really awkward, and it's so interesting that I've been in situations before where the conversation becomes about status, where this is about how to spend time, right? Significance is actually about giving to other people, giving to your community. And one of the things I've got some people at the moment doing a 7-week challenge based around this stories idea. And, you know, for the 7th week, which is status and significance, it's go spend time with one of your elderly neighbours or do something for them. So, yeah, it's a pretty positive idea. Let's not focus too or get fixated by that issue with status. But the data shows it very clearly. More status, longer, happier, healthy life. Hey.
You talked about multitasking. I am a serial multitasker. And
Hold on, you can't be a serial multitasker, because serial means you do one thing at a time, isn't it?
True.
Caught.
But I get that sense of achievement when I multitask. I feel that I'm cramming in lots. You know, I walk to work, I am on the phone doing things, get to work, and I feel, yes, it's 9 o'clock and I've already done loads of stuff, and I feel great about it. You're talking about, obviously, just doing that one thing at a time and focusing on that one thing. And I do see that in some respects as well, and the benefits to doing that. But to do that all the time, I don't know how I'm going to feel about it. So I just wanted to get your take on it from someone who is multitasking quite a lot to trying to go cold turkey, if you like. How do you change your mindset to feel that you are being positive in the moment?
It's a really good question, and thank you. One of the interesting things about the social sciences, of course, they're different to the natural sciences, physical sciences, where, you know, E equals MC squared, and that's done. It's not like, let's take outside and offline. If you spend, one of the reasons I wanted to have that in is because we spend too much time indoors and too much time online. But some time indoors is really good, right? Because sometimes it rains, and it's nice to sleep indoors. And the internet is awesome, isn't it? It means you can watch the TV show you want to watch right now. It means you can get information about all sorts of things. You can connect with all sorts of people. So I'm not anti those things. And actually, it's a really interesting point you have here about multitasking. I wouldn't say you need to go cold turkey on it. It sounds like it's giving you a real boost. Do it in the right times, in the right ways, and the times that it works for you. But maybe when you get to the end of the day, and let's say you are, you know, watching The Office. Let's say you watch the US Office because it's so good. Don't try and book your holidays or do your Ocado shop or, I don't know, whatever else you might be doing, or try and do your filing or do something else at the same time, because you won't get to enjoy that thing as much. And when you're, out for dinner with friends, don't have your telephone on the table. I'm sure you don't. But it's that idea. Do you see what I mean? Yeah, try, but. And that's the other thing. That's the reason why it's the 7 ideas. It's not like, if you just don't do that at all. But if you think about, again, the 7 different reasons. Do you remember that? The 7 reasons why we're feeling so time pressed. If you're managing the other stuff a bit better, maybe that's okay. Don't try and be perfect. Multitasking. Anyway, whatever. No, I can't do it, obviously. And technically, I think they say it's thin slicing anyway. But anyway. Good question, thank you. Hello.
Hi. So I'm loving what you're saying, basically.
Thank you. I have stickers, by the way. Did I tell you about my stickers that I made?
That's really... I
put one on my telephone. I'm really proud of these. My wife, well, she's right. It's really hard to read them. But you're all welcome to take one of these, because I got them printed. They arrived today. I designed them yesterday myself, because the people at Penguin were taking too long. And that's why they're not designed that well. But I did my best. Anyway, sorry. Carry on with your question. I'll tell you about my stickers.
I love it, and I'm trying to think about it as how it would practically work. So, let's talk about a weekend.
Okay.
How do you actually plan it? And then I'm thinking, I bet you have some really good examples from your life of how you've found stories into your weekend, or suggestions, or both.
Fantastic question, and I could talk. I did a workshop the other day with some people where we were designing their holidays and weekends, and we were kind of playing with those ideas. There's quite a lot to go through. But one of the ways I use it, if I'm going to be really honest, and it's probably important to do that, is, because we've got young kids, and sometimes, like last weekend, they just want to go to the park. We're not going to have a big kind of like hero's journey, kind of, go down into this kind of hole, this big kind of challenge. That's not going to happen for us every weekend. And that's one of the reasons why I did the sticker, actually, and I've got it written on on a big thing written on the wall, because then I think, okay, fine. What we need to do, well, for a start, if I ever pick up my telephone, my daughter says, outside and offline, Daddy. She's really clear about that, which is brilliant, because I don't want to check my email at the weekend, but I'm just some idiot who does. Unless I'm reminded to, actually, we've got a cupboard, and we're trying to do less of that. But I can tick the box. I know I'm hanging out with my kids, having, their relationship is incredibly important to me, and it's super fun, right? And because it was really hot, we just didn't want to go anywhere or do anything. But we had dinner in, we've got a little garden, we had dinner in the garden, and we put up some bunting, and we were like, this is like a festival dinner. And we sat around doing nothing. But we decided that it was special, and that was one of that lovely piece of research about. You saw that wavy line, and I sort of skimmed over it. It takes much more, I think, to describe. But it's not just the kind of high points, but enjoying the ordinary stuff is really important too. So for me, it can be kind of confirmatory as to what I'm doing, but also it can be kind of. Okay, I need a bit more of this or a bit more of that. And my take on it is, if you use a checklist like that and it gives you 5-10% more happiness over the weekend, I mean, that's awesome, right? I know, that seems like fantastic to me. But also, if I go away somewhere, there's a friend of mine that I go away with once a year, I will now think about how we can have a hero's journey and have something really challenging. We go wild camping. And wild camping is great because you're not supposed to do it in England. So, you've got the challenge, right? You've got to get, you've got to find the place. We've got to find the place. We find the place on Google, then we go there. And it's really hard and kind of annoying. But then you get somewhere and you do something that's kind of meaningful, of course, outside and offline. But again, coming back to your question about, the outside and offline thing, is we also take our phones with us. And we tend to try and go somewhere where there's no service. But I'll turn my phone off anyway. But we might take some pictures. Especially when the sun's setting or the sun's rising, or in some random place. But that idea of designing about the beginnings and the ends can be really powerful with a weekend, in terms of that beginning being obviously kind of new, and you're kind of shifting from the anticipating self to the experiencing self. It's kind of an interesting period. But then at the end, giving yourself the space to kind of land. And to bring the ideas. You think about transformation, the importance of becoming. If you just go from one experience to the next, and you sort of bounce from moment to moment to moment, and you don't bring what you've learned and who you've become into moments, I think you just continue bouncing. But you're missing out on the opportunities for transformation and understanding who you are and where you're going. Is that a shortish answer? I mean, I could really go on about it and get into detail, but any more? Yes, hello.
Sorry, just to ask, part of it's wanting to help other people, and the other bit's around status and people go, yes, Sarah's amazing.
Would you just do it in the microphone?
Yeah. I was thinking, can the kind of checklist and framework be used by me to apply to other people? Partly so that when I'm delivering something to a group of people, they have an amazing experience and I feel good about that. But also, secondly, the selfish bit, that it boosts my kind of status up because they go away from that going, that's a really good session. So can you think about incorporating in that hero's journey for other people, or does it have to come from them and their values?
No, I love, fantastic question, thank you. Yes, you can design that for them, and you should. Yeah. If you do that, if you think about the magic of the new peak end rules is they will remember what happens at the beginning, they'll remember what happens at the end, so I better make this good, right? I'm going to have to make this really good. Okay, maybe I'll say this with a French accent or something. I don't know. That won't work. But so what happens at the beginning, what happens then is incredibly important, because they're going to want to look back on that time that you delivered to them, and understanding that stuff about the peaks that's going to make it memorable and stick with them and make a difference to them. Absolutely. I think you should design an experience using that stuff. And you can also use the hero's journey in terms of the fact that, let's say, I don't know if you're teaching workshops or you're just designing a weekend for your family or a trip or whatever you're doing, if you just make it nice, you are missing out on giving them the opportunity to have a hero's journey. And that hero's journey is the archetypal experience that we all have anyway. But if you include hardship, and it's where you include it, if you understand the hero's journey, you know it has to happen, not right at the beginning. You think about when you arrive on holiday and you get there and it's just all horrible. That's not right. You need to land, and then you need to be ready for the adventure and then go into the adventure. And that adventure should have its challenges. It should have its tests, its allies, and its enemies. And if you can take them on that journey and they come out the other side, they really feel like they've done something. Great question. Thank you.
I'm afraid we're out of time.
We're out of time. Thank you so much. I've got to make the end good now. I was thinking about it.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you'd like to carry on these conversations, and I know James would be happy to stick around and chat to people more in the books here, and if you wanted to get things signed and so on. The stickers, so do grab stickers.
You can stick them on your phone, you see.
I found this, I mean, apart from that ridiculous dancing thing where I was asked to come on stage, which was lovely. That's been really interesting. A couple of things have really stuck with me. So one is, I love Brené Brown's stuff on vulnerability, and actually I think that idea of being able to sort of share the trough of the hero's journey is a real permission to share the warts and all view of ourselves. Because if you look at what we do on social media, we do the here's my perfect thing, here's my happy family, here's my lovely job. And actually, what you're helping us remember is that when we share a bit more like, and then I broke the arm, or then I dropped the thing, and it actually creates a bit more vulnerability, a bit more connection, a bit more humour, a bit more experience for you and others. And I think actually we're too often in this perfect world way of telling our stories. So that's a really helpful reminder. But I've also been reflecting recently on how I feel as though I've been able to cope a little bit more effectively with difficult days. And I think your beginning end thing might have something to do with it. So I now have a habit of doing a little bit of mindfulness when I first wake up and a little bit of what's been good today at the end of the day. And that's become quite a lasting habit. And I just realised from what you said that bookends my day with a good thing on either end, despite all the chaos that happens in between. And I think actually you're really onto something with that, because the day feels like it started quite well and ended quite well, despite I might have been in A&E with my daughter or whatever has happened in the interim. So thank you for that, well, all of what you've shared this evening. And before we leave, folks, just a couple of really quick announcements. So our next event is in here on the 17th of July with a brilliant British Buddhist monk called Gilong Tubten, who's recently collaborated with Ruby Wax on a great book. And he's just a really lovely, wise practitioner of mindfulness, but also in the context of modern life. He's very engaging and funny, but also wise. So do join us on the 17th of July. James has got all kinds of great stuff like these stickers, so do come and grab them. We'll send a follow-up email tomorrow with links to James' stuff if you want to find out more, and do grab him this evening. The only other request I had was, as we leave this evening, if you could take any of the kind of banana skins, cups and things that are to do with what we've created this evening and bring them towards the back. That really helps our volunteers in terms of tidying this all away. But it just leaves me to say thank you so much for being here and all of your lovely engagement and comments. And please join me one more time in giving James a massive thank you. Brilliant.